Welcome to the Kansas City Public Library. I'm Henry Fortunato, Director of Public Affairs, and this is part of our health and wellness programming. Danny O'Neill is going to talk about caffeine as a growth hormone. This is going to explain why we all look up to Danny O'Neill. Actually, we do, and it's not just because he's 8 feet tall. What he's done with the Roasterie is a classic American entrepreneurial story. From his basement in Brookside, he's become the bean baron of Kansas City. This morning, we'll hear his story in a public conversation conducted by everyone's favorite library director, Crosby Kemper III. And if you like this one, there'll be 2 more this week. On Wednesday at Central in the evening, we'll have one of these conversations with Ollie Gates. And then on Friday at Central in the lunch hour, about 11:30, we'll have one with Clara Reyes, the founder of Dos Mundos. This is all part of the library's participation in Global Entrepreneurship Week, which is sponsored by the Kauffman Foundation. I also want to point out that if all of this entrepreneurial activity incites you or excites you to start doing your own thing, do please come down to the Central Library, our Block Business Career and Information Center, where there are a ton of materials about starting up your own business and becoming an entrepreneur. Anyway, without further ado, please welcome Danny O'Neill and Crosby Kemper.
Danny, first of all, thank you for the coffee and pastries. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
And thank you. You haven't always been the bean baron.
No.
I mean, you had to achieve this somehow. And there's a moment in your career when you were working for a larger company, doing international business, et cetera, but you decided at that moment you didn't want to do that anymore, and you wanted to roast coffee. But you did it entirely on your own, one-man show in the basement or the garage of your house in Brookside, is that right? The house in Brookside. What was the inspiration for that moment, and what happened?
There were a couple of what I call turning points or inflection points, if you will. Probably the first one was when it was a 91 or 92, I believe, and I was in Russia, and I was helping as a volunteer consultant to help the Russians turn their kind of the quagmire into a market economy. And anyway, the net was I was working with them, and they were so full of life and passion. They were so vibrant, and I looked at them and I thought, gosh, that used to be me. I used to be like that, and I felt at the time that the corporate world was kind of making me be somebody I didn't want to be, and trying to conform and mold me, and it wasn't working. So I came back just really hell-bent on doing something different. And the only thing I could think of was coffee. And so after a while, I got up the courage to start sharing that with my friends, and they kind of mocked me, or it's like, yeah, good luck, make a living off of that. And again, this is in '92, and there were maybe 1 or 2 coffee shops in Kansas City, and the whole bean phenomenon really hadn't hit, and so. But anyway, that was kind of the inspiration for it. It was the only idea that I had, to tell you the truth.
You bought a coffee roaster.
Yeah, in Corvallis, Oregon.
In Corvallis, Oregon. So you buy this roaster. It's you and the roaster basically. At this point. That's
and my dog Chewy.
The business, and your dog Chewy. So tell us where did you put the machine? And
yeah, so I typical entrepreneur, just race ahead, hurry up, just do it. So I was in Corvallis, Oregon, this old church. This crabby old German guy who built the roaster, so I bought it. I had the total of $17,000 saved up, and the roaster was $12,000, so now I have 5. And a guy with a big company in the big truck pulls up to my house in Brookside, and he's big and crabby and very union, not anti-union, but very union. There's no dock, there's no fork truck, there's no that. So I just said, just hush up. And I went up and I got a hammer, and I just pounded the crate apart and put it down on this Grand Avenue piece by piece, and just told him to get out of there. And then I hauled it up to the house, and it wouldn't fit in the basement. door because, of course, that would have taken me like 10 seconds to measure that ahead of time, and I didn't have the time to do that. So I had to spend a couple of weeks to get somebody to saw it in half and put it on the basement and put it back together. But yeah, every year at this time, I almost can think almost day by day of how it went about. But fear is probably the predominant emotion I fear.
Fear is a great motivator. Yeah, when
it
you
is.
got your coffee roaster in pieces outside the basement. Yeah. Well, and obviously we know this has been successful. So we'll come back to this moment about the growth of the company. But the guy who can quit this job with a bigger company and take his life savings, which are not exactly going to get you to the Waldorf Astoria, and make this move. Where did this all come from? You grew up in Iowa?
Yeah, I grew up middle of 10 kids and not much money. And I think back, the corporate was a little bit undergrad. When I was little, it was like, St. Rosa Lima's, the nuns and the priests, and everybody's trying to whack me back in the line. And I always felt like in statistics, you have these outliers, and I always felt like an outlier. And then all the kids, we were, just Irish Catholic Democrat, and I would always challenge that. And so I think that notion of just being stubborn and independent and not following the rules was kind of innate, or I think I grew up with it, or I had it when I was born. And then I think my dad, inspired us to really, really work hard, to never quit, just never quit, never quit. Just whatever you start, finish. And we have this notion that we use in the company sometimes where we say, bring back the bird. So just don't come back and say, I can't, or it won't, or just do it.
Bring back the bird being a hunting term.
Yeah.
You go out with the dog to hunt, and you better.
Yeah, and the good dogs would never come back without the bird. You just, whatever it took, you just do it.
Gotta have the passion to do it. So you grow up with a Catholic, large Catholic family, and the education is important. But there's an educational trip that you took in high school. Is that right? To where you discover Latin America, you discover Central America.
Right, and it was kind of on a weird whim too. Just how you'd do something kind of crazy. Well, I signed up to be a foreign exchange student, and so I was in my senior year and had never been on a jet, had basically never really left Iowa without one of my brothers. And so lo and behold, I get a letter after Christmas that says 3 weeks later, you're going to go to Costa Rica for a year. And of course, I didn't speak a word of Spanish, and very much date myself here, but I had to go to the library or to our shelves and look up the encyclopedia to find out where Costa Rica was. And so get a passport and all this stuff. This is 1978, and so that kind of inspired it.
And did you start drinking coffee then? Did you see coffee pickers in Costa Rica? I mean,
I had to walk about a mile and a little more than a mile to school, and I would walk right through the coffee plantation. But I didn't even drink coffee. I drank tea with my family every day, and then later that in the summer, it was November 22nd, exactly 1978. We were out of school, and my friends were going coffee picking, and growing up in Iowa, we walked beans, detasseled corn, chopped thistles, fixed fence, did all the farm stuff every weekend, every summer. And then, so some of them were going bananas, some of them were doing pineapple work, some of them were going coffee picking. And I thought, that sounds fun. So I went coffee picking, and even though I didn't drink coffee, I was up in the mountains, and it was just beautiful. I can just still feel it, just beautiful, beautiful, bright blue skies and clear, and it was just fun. Nicolas was the name of the farmer. Farmers are, I love farmers, and it was just felt like being in the middle of a cornfield having a fight detasseling corn. It was fun. And then when I came back, I started undergrad at Iowa State, and as soon as I did finals, I started drinking coffee, and have not missed a day since.
Inspiration. I think this is the way many of us started drinking.
It's funny how you remember those moments, right? I mean, another clear turning point.
And so you drink coffee in Ames to get through Iowa State. We can understand that. You were an international studies, poli-sci major. You had a little bit of wanderlust, maybe
Very much.
Want to see the world. So you go to work for a bigger company. You make it out to Seattle maybe for a while and see the beginnings of this phenomenon that we're in the middle of.
I'd say, yeah, back when, when it was really getting going, and nothing against Starbucks, but back when Starbucks was really, it really was special. It was a unique, cool, special company. Not that it's not a great company now, but when something goes from 1 or 2 or 10 to 40,000, there's that ubiquitousness is it's hard to say.
You lose the personal touch.
Yeah,
you can see it in Starbucks. Howard Schultz trying to come back into the company, trying to re-inject that, but it's an on high out to the 40,000 instead of
it's so big. It's hard
being personal, and so you see this, and you start to become a serious bean connoisseur at this point. I mean, would you say that you started to think of coffee as a special?
Yeah, today you'd say like somebody's really into it, and you kind of appreciate it, whether it be photography or acting or wine, or in my case it was coffee. But back then it was kind of weird. People would always think that's weird. I was just fixated on coffee, and I got this old coffee. I had heard somewhere, I think in Seattle, I don't remember where, but you could take an air popcorn popper and actually make a roaster out of it. So I did that, and told my friends about it, and they would just all look at me, and it wasn't like today you'd say, oh, that's cool, well, he's really into whatever. It was weird. I was kind of a geek.
There's this kind of interesting moment in a kind of inflection point in the world, it seems to me. We've talked to in these conversations before to John McDonald, who I think you know well, as a friend of yours and of mine. It's sort of the same thing with John, craft beers. I mean, everybody had gone to drinking Budweiser and Coors, and then all of a sudden there's this moment when people like John start to say, wait a minute, there's no taste in these beers, and we got to do something different. And craft beers come along. Gail Lozoff and we get the Pizza Huts of the world taking over the world, and then all of a sudden there's an inflection point, and now we want the local pizza.
And she's particularly cool because she did it with bagels too,
And she did it with bagels.
Yeah, very bright lady. Yeah. And before that, I was talking to Doug Frost about wine. And I think that's probably where our biggest comparison is, or, of a like example. We're maybe 10, 12, 15 years behind the fine wine industry.
Right.
So if you talk to Doug Frost, or I was talking to Steve Cole, another really wine expert, and I was telling him about the terms and what we do, and then how sometimes we're kind of parochial, we fight against each other, and he said the fine wine guys all went through the same thing. And it's it's a maturity, I think, as an industry. We're still very young, and so there's some of that. Well, if you're doing well, it must be at my expense, which of course is crazy. We should all do
right.
Well.
And okay, so you get the inspiration. You're at this inflection point, which is, as it turns out, is an inflection point maybe in the world, but it's certainly an inflection point for you. And you've reassembled your coffee roaster in the basement. And there's you and a couple of 100 million customers out there. But how do you starting out? You go door to door. You roasted some and took it to where'd you go?
It's so great question, because you don't think about that. But I was so scared, just so scared, because I have this horrible fear of failure, right? And I don't know really where that comes from. Doesn't matter. But I was just scared to death. So you can either that can motivate you or immobilize you, and I was just scared to death, so I was not going to go down without trying. So I just went around, and all the places that I thought would be easy, there was a coffee shop close to my house, and some other places, some kind of the usual suspects that you all know. You think, oh my God, if there's a guy roasting her coffee, 6 blocks away, there'd be the first one. Well, they were the ones that would not really be that interested, but the ones that were interested, and now looking back, of course, it makes sense, were those that were just this anal retentive, just this intense focus on perfection. So Marcel at Andres, the Nelson Atkins, Steve Cole from Cafe Allegro, these folks were the ones that were the most, and I think if Michael Smith had been around at that point in time, he would have been an early adopter. Jimmy at JJ's, and some of these just wonderful, great people. Houston's on the plaza at the time. They were all the ones that went, which at some point I thought, oh my God, I would give my coffee to them to be able to say they're using my coffee. So they were the early ones but at first though, Stormy Normie, who's here today.
Stormy Norman.
We're going to get to you, Stormy
Wave.
Norman.
There he is.
I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, but
Well, your early customers, so you get some of these early.
So
customers.
I'd get up. Oh, I know. Norman found the logbook, and he actually got the roaster hooked up in September, the end of September. So I always tell people, we were incorporated November 4th of 1993, and that was our anniversary. But the truth is, I would have sold somebody coffee in September if they would have bought it. So I'm going September to October, November, December, and I haven't found one soul to buy a pound of coffee. And back then, the wholesale price of the coffee was $3.75 a pound.
And you had $5,000, as we will remember from.
So
earlier
every day, that's where it's
getting
just a
smaller.
little bit less. So I get this intense sense of urgency. I'm about ready to pay somebody to buy my coffee. I swear to God, I just want to hurry up. And everybody's calling me every day, just selling coffee, just selling coffee. Because there's a lot of folks that want a success story, but there's a lot of folks that are in their safe place that can kind of say, see, he didn't make it either, so I'm not going to try it. So there was a little bit of that going on. But anyway, I finally, in December, made a sales to Pam Murphy. And God knows I'll never forget it. But she bought 10 pounds of coffee. She had the espresso cart at KU Med Center.
So she's your actual first customer.
The first one.
The espresso cart at KU Med.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I drove down State Line back to my house, and
it's a good thing keeping those doctors awake during surgery, too. I just want to say it's a good thing.
You want them highly caffeinated, I think.
Yeah.
So I brought the coffee, I roasted it, brought it back, and this is a kind of a telling instance because it really kind of speaks to what the market was like at that time. So I bring it back to her, and she goes, "What's that?" And I said, "What's your order?" And she goes, "Where'd you get it?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, where'd I get it? I roasted it. I just did it." She goes, "What?" I go, "Why?" And she goes, "Well, I never thought about it before, but I would just order, and 2 weeks later or so, the coffee would come. And I guess I never ever thought about where it came from." And so there really was no local market, and that was obviously part of the opportunity, but also part of the problem. So if I would have been any earlier as a company, I think it would have been too early, and if any later, it would have been too late. But that's how it started, one by one, and then Dave Nepstead down at the Commerce Bank building was I think the second or third customer, and pretty soon I got 8 or 9 customers that month. And then in January, my dad started coming down. He was retired, and he started coming down from Iowa and helping me. And a typical day would go like this. We'd get up in the morning and go deliver what we had sold the day before. Gourmet Grocer on the plaza was another one. Tom? Can't think of his last name, but he was an early customer.
Tom Anderson.
And so I'd sell all day long, and then I'd go back about 5 or 6 and start roasting and packaging the coffee that I'd sold. And so that was taken up to about 4 in the morning. And then I'd get back up at 7 and go deliver it again. And it was...
Yeah. I have to have a lot of passion to do that, or a lot of fear, or both.
Both, yeah. I don't think, and caffeine.
And caffeine. Yeah, you were in the right business, I guess.
But it said, when you listen to somebody say, "Oh, working 18, 20-hour days," that rolls off the tongue a lot easier than it does to actually do it, 18, 20-hour days. And
pretty exciting. Maybe the first time, Gail has a very similar story about her success leading to a lot harder work than she expected.
Oh my gosh!
The first few days. And so you get over this financial moment, but there was a bad financial moment right there before you hit those 8 to 10 customers. Your mortgage payment was coming due.
Yeah, and it sounds so. Any Iowans in the crowd will get it, but it sounds so stupidly naive. But it was like December, getting towards the end of December, and my house payment's $850. That's the only bill I have in my life, and I'm driving this old car, I'm parking like two blocks away from where my appointments are because I don't want them to see what I'm driving, this beat up old 77 Chevy Impala. And so I keep thinking, geez, you know, I have this $5,000 and all day I'm like this, right? So I keep thinking I'm going to make this house payment in 4 or 5 months. I'm not going to have any money. This is stupid. So I called up the mortgage company. It was in LA. And I said, you know, I want to quit making my house payment for a while. And this woman says, of course, this is 93. Today they'd say, okay, what do you need? But back then it was like, well, you can't not make your house payment. I said, well, I could not make my house payment. And I still remember she was real nice, but she goes, well, we'd take your house. And I said, well, this is stupid. I have this much money left. I want to start the company, but this isn't going to work. And so she said, well, what do you need? And I wish I would have asked for more time, but I said, maybe 3 months. So she said, okay, but you can't just start up again. You're going to have to make payment in halves to get caught back up. So again, December of 93, so January 94. Well, in March of 1994, there's this horrible earthquake in LA. And it happens the office that held the mortgage was in LA. So March comes and goes, and they don't call me, and I sure don't call them. April comes, May comes, and then this nice little golden retriever type woman, it was a Rottweiler on the phone at the end of March, and she was just, I answered the phone, it was just like, and I said, well, you know, we're getting there, cash flows, and you will pay your house payment. You will write us a check. I think it was like $7,800 or something like that. It was a Tuesday. I vividly remember sitting next to the green coffee bags in the sunroom. You will pay, we will have your check on Friday, or we will have your house. So I had 3 days. But without that, you know, these weird things always happen. And without that, we probably wouldn't have had the money to keep going. And
so you owe your success to the LA earthquake.
Yeah, to some extent.
That's great. So, but you're in business. You're getting help from your father. You call Stormin Norman and get him involved.
Thank God Norman was on that plane. It's March 6th of 1994, and you know, I'm driving to the airport. It's right after the Brookside Art Fair. The day before, we set the largest cappuccino in the world contest. I think we made a 33-gallon cappuccino. It was supposed to take a couple hours. It ended up taking like 12 hours to make it. And I was just physically and mentally totally exhausted. And I told Norman, if he wouldn't have been on that plane, I think I would have just kept driving to Canada and not come back. I was so tired. And he came, and he was there. And I still remember I picked up his bag. He had like 2 shirts and a pair of pants in there. And so together then we started, and then we would finish like instead of like 4 in the morning, then we would finish like at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and Norm would come up the steps and he'd say, let's go get a burger. And we'd go get a hamburger, or we'd go to Tom Topic, or we'd go to the Bronx. And that's where I pulled out a pop one time. They had nitro, and I told Normie, I said, oh my God, Normie, that'd be such a cool idea for a blend, a name. But so we'd finish at 8 or 9 o'clock. And I remember one time saying to Normie, when we were like, had no money at all, when he was there then, to finish at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, one time I said, God, Normie, I could go get another job if I needed to. I could have like another career here, because to finish at 8 or 9 at night was like, you know, instead of
really
4 in the
early,
morning,
yeah.
it was like, geez, what are we gonna do?
A gift, yeah.
It was a gift. And then together it was starting to take till 2 or 3 in the morning, and it wasn't too long, and then we were working around the clock, and we were working the house, of course, and there was only a 100 amp box, and the roaster took 80 amps. So we had no air conditioning or anything. So the roaster took all the electricity, so all we basically had were lights, roaster, and well, that was kind of it.
That was it.
Yeah,
okay, yeah. It. No cable. No wonder you didn't have anything to do. And so talk about the coffee. I mean, the thing that you do is and you know, Starbucks started this maybe, or made it national and international, but you do a very special version of that. I mean, it's what you call specialty coffee. It's very high end, very high quality. Talk about the quality of the coffee and where it comes from.
You bet. And you know, I'm, again, 1 of 10 kids, no money, so I had no snobby, pretentious background. Same with Normie. Norman's an Iowa guy, farm boy. And so we started with just a real clear, just this notion of quality, just like just a purity. Although we never use that word, but just simple, unadorned quality, just the best coffee that you can find in the world, the best quality we can find. And again, we didn't really have any resources. So looking back, I mean, it was a great strategy, but honestly, it was the only strategy. Here in town, Folgers roasted 650,000 pounds a day. So an analogy would be like you're going to make cars, build cars, and you're going to go against GM or something. It would be ludicrous. So there was no possible way that we didn't have enough time in our lifetime to ever ramp up and try to compete on anything volume-wise, right? So quality was the only thing that we really could, and that was the only interest that we had either. Also, Norman had a background of Folgers and Butternut and stuff like that, and I used to sell Norman boxes. That's where I met Norman. He was a customer, hard-headed customer too, but no. But so anyway, so we just said, you know what, we're going after quality. And then air roasted, if it was air roasted or micro toasted or roasted upside down, I really didn't care, although, I mean, it was the best tasting coffee I'd ever had in my life.
And explain air roasted versus, let's say, what Folgers was doing down at the bottom.
Yeah, so air roasted is it's like a hot air popcorn pop or a fountain, if you will, but the air is really soft. Every bean gets perfect individual treatment. And then bean to bean uniformity within the batch is perfect. And then batch to batch uniformity is just absolutely dead on perfect. And the drum roasters fight what they call tipping on a batch by batch basis. And it's kind of like if you think about your clothes dryer, and all the clothes on the outside of that might be so dry, they're staticky, and the inside you might have a wadded up pair of blue jeans that's still wet. Well, in the drum roaster, the beans on the outside can have what's called tipping. So one side of them might be burnt, the other side under roasted, and you get a kind of this edge or harshness of bitterness in that from time to time that we just, with air roasting, you just never get. And again, I came in from the outside, so I didn't care what it was.
Right. You just went up based on taste. And so part of it's the process itself, which is more of a craft process.
Yeah.
But part of it's also the bean, the special beans. And those, we don't grow those in our backyard here in Kansas City. So you've got to go to places like Costa Rica and Panama and Brazil and
and
Colombia.
India and Africa. And we get coffee from about 31 countries. And we started with 3 countries at the beginning. And then so we have that. So best coffee that we can buy, best roasted, which is air roasted, and then freshness, as fast as you can physically get it to the customer, the better. We get it now. Back when we started, people would say, oh, I get my coffee from Seattle, or I get my coffee from Italy. And if it was, you know, I understood, but it was, I mean, it's like bragging about how far away from your bakery you get your bread. It's not something you want to brag about, right? I mean, fresh is best. And and what we do, I think, Crosby, on the farmer side is we source it kind of old-fashioned, like we did business in Iowa. You know, nobody was going anywhere, so you didn't like take advantage because you know, word gets out. So we just had this old-fashioned notion of dealing with farmers who we grew up with as, you know, as partners.
So you actually go and visit these farmers in Costa Rica or Panama or Brazil and get to know them personally. You're buying from them directly. You're not buying through brokers or wholesalers. Yeah,
for 18 years now, we're, you know, some of I think our earliest one, like our broker now, with our main one that kind of handles the transactions of, you know, the regulations and stuff. We've been dealing with the main one now for almost 18 years. We were 3 months old when we started dealing with them. And then the farmers, some of them we have 15-year relationship with.
So it takes a lot of time, I would assume, to sort of manage these relationships. If you built a relationship over that period of time, and now you're 31 different countries, you say, that you've got coffee from. But you've also got a reputation, and I think you're proud of the fact that not only do you maintain these relationships as a commercial relationship, but you also are involved in giving back into the communities that these farmers live in, sustainability projects and education projects. And
yeah, preschools, and we probably get more credit than we actually do, but it's a great deal, and it doesn't take much. The first one, that whole notion of the fair trade and all that, it was early on. It was just based on nasty coffee. The quality was horrible, and they tried to kind of use it was kind of a guilt deal. Well, it's for a good cause. Well, as consumers with discretionary income, we're going to reach out and we're going to buy what tastes good. So Normie and I said, well, that's crazy. Why don't you start with great coffee? And then, so the first one that we did was in Brazil. And usually there's lots of unintended consequences, and we're kind of used to those consequences being negative. But we started this in Brazil, and we're still buying from Marcelo today. And I said to Marcelo, okay, this is perfect. It was a long trip, and we figured out where we're going to buy this great, incredibly extraordinary world-class coffee. And he gave me the price, and I said, there's no way we can pay that. It's too low. I said I would be embarrassed if we're
too low.
If
you can't pay that because it's too low a price. Okay.
It was below $1 a pound, and I said I would just be crushed if the world found out what we were paying. He goes, no, you can't put your mores on us. It doesn't work that way. That's a great fair price, and everybody's doing well with that price. And I said, no, I can't do it because I can't do it. So we argued a little bit, and then we agreed to to pay 15 cents a pound extra, and we would put that 15 cents a pound into the local community, and whatever they needed. And again, we don't do that imperialistically, in that we don't say, geez, Crosby, we really like you. We're going to build you a road, or we're going to build you. So we always ask, what does it's common sense, obviously. What does a community need? They needed a preschool. So we determined to build a preschool, and in a few months we had 60 kids, and so pretty soon the kids started showing up dirty. So we put in some showers and started teaching hygiene, which then the kids went home and taught the parents. And then we found out that they were getting hungry or coming to class hungry, and so we put in a little kitchen, and then so we had this was just a great deal. Then the Germans got on board, the Italians got on board, the Japanese got on board, and it just fostered. And so what also happened then, that 15 cents a pound eliminated the employment problem, because when it came coffee picking time, they didn't have enough pickers. As women still being the primary social caregivers of the kids couldn't go out because the kids were there. Well, the kids were now in school. The women could go to work, and it solved an employment problem. And then it doubled family income in many cases. And so anyway, we were like, oh my God, this does really work. So we did a similar deal in Costa Rica, a similar deal in Colombia. And then 2 years ago, January, they came to us in Brazil for band uniforms. And when they came for band uniforms, we fired them. We said, you guys, you know what, you've graduated, and we're going to go back and help folks that are hungry. But I mean, it was really a special deal, and it's just different. It's based on our own selfish best interest is there too. So every year that we can continue to buy that coffee, it becomes less and less costly for us to go find in new farms.
You got loyalty from great producers.
You bet.
And you have great coffee, so you can charge a little bit more for it.
You bet. Yeah. And that's it.
So it's a virtuous circle. And there's some philosophy, it sounds like, behind this about sustainability and about what you're doing every day. You're not trying to get the cheapest price. You're trying to develop long-term loyalty. You talked to me about an argument you had with someone at Rockhurst, I think, at one point about what the purpose is of what you do.
Kind of the stakeholder versus stockholder. And I just get really, I will not today, but I get really animated about that whole myopic, kind of insular, narrow view of I have a fiduciary responsibility to the stakeholder. And then it's kind of a cover for all this abhorrent behavior, and I never believed in that. And back in 91, 92, 93, we had these arguments about stakeholder versus stockholder, and of course and I know you have a great reputation in that fashion, Crosby. You have a very open stakeholder, so what's good for the community is, you know, ultimately good for each of us, and we've always had that notion as a company. What's good for everybody involved is ultimately going to serve us well, instead of the other way around, you know.
Well, doing it right is very close to doing the right thing.
Exactly.
So.
It feels good. I mean, and I do think it's compelling in that it, you do it once, it feels good. You do it again, and then you just keep doing it. We're very far from perfect, but I mean, that's our compass.
You're still making a nice profit, and
we strive for that.
That's part of how you're able to do this. But at some point, something I read or saw, you said, and maybe it's a philosophy that comes partly from what you do and how you do it. Trees take time, and the coffee bean, you know, is not something that you can do overnight. You have to think long term.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah, I think so. You know, we're at least like if we were in, maybe the same in Missouri, I don't quite know, but we're like 5 generations removed from the prairie, right? And so we sometimes normally now say you need to chop wood. If you don't chop wood, you died. The winters were severe, so you had a long term. You think about what you need in the future, and then as we apply that to the company, you know, we try to chop wood all the time. We're always thinking about next year, the next year, the next year, the next year, and you know, and when in '94 when Norman came, it kind of quit being just about me, and then it's, you know, as time goes on, it's less and less. So we think about, you know, what's the company in the future, and what's the staff in the future, and it's just kind of taken. It's kind of going on. Maybe in your case, like the library is, I don't know, but it's I'm kind of looking at it as I'm just one of the team, you know.
Right. Yeah. And you've put together a great team. You've also changed things a little bit, because you were wholesaling coffee to the ultimate user of the coffee, but now you are yourself with the cafe. You started the cafe, the Roasterie Cafe, which used to be a great success, and that's expanded what you do a little bit, because we're all eating your pastries as well as drinking your coffee. And
actually, my wife's, but
your wife's
in her team at the cafe. But
Carla, the Dream Bean.
Yeah,
right. The Dream Bean.
Well, I mentioned this to Steve Cole one day, and he said no, he was fine with it. But I said, when I was we were 12 years old, and it became apparent from the marketplace that not having a retail presence was hurting us. And and I remember thinking and saying, gosh, I was very aware. Sometimes you get in these things, you have no idea what you're doing. Well, in one sense, that was true. We didn't know what we were doing, but I knew retail and how hard it was. And my friend Steve Cole just encapsulated it perfectly. He goes, ooh, Danny, just be careful. If you invite the public in, or if you open your doors to the public might come in. And anybody who's done retail knows what I'm talking about. It is so hard, and I do not do it. I just, you know, I did my best to create the conditions for success, but I am not there on a daily basis making it happen. But yeah, so I think the telling piece of that is, though, at that point in time, we were just having a baby. We just started we just bought the factory. We couldn't have picked a worse time personally for us to open a cafe. Absolutely. Selfishly, it was the last thing I wanted to do. But I felt strongly that that the company needed it. And God knows we make a lot of mistakes, but I've always tried to do what's best for the company, and then ultimately knowing, again, selfishly, that what's best for the company is ultimately best for us, for everybody. But so yeah, it was a lot of work.
It's clearly a family business. Those of us who are patrons of the cafe love seeing you show up on your bicycle on the weekend with the kids and coming in to see.
Looks like the Clampett showed up.
Yeah, well, a little better than Clampett's, but you've renovated, you've established the roastery, you expanded and renovated too, and watching that happen, the branding that you do is interesting. There are things like the Christopher Elbow chocolates, again, another another great local entrepreneur who's created a national business. Or the airplane. Talk a little bit about the brand, what the airplane represents in the brand of the coffee and of the cafe.
You bet. It started by Jimmy Costa, who helped us create the first logo. Jimmy Costa and Francis Basta Costa. So they had this big, long table, maybe 50, 60, 70 books out with all these different images. And I walked in, their building was up their office was next to Drexel Hall. And just from afar, I saw the DC-3. I said, that's it. So over the course of about a month, the logo came together. And so airplane, air roasted, so it was symbolic for the air roasting, but you know, I was kind of a pilot wannabe. Normie was a pilot wannabe. And so it represented air roasting, but I think it also represented for us, as we both love Art Deco, and it represented kind of adventure, kind of his longing for maybe wanderlust, as you said.
It's adventure. It's also stylish. It's very stylish. It's a stylish logo, and that the Art Deco sense.
And we didn't want something that would come up, you know, that would look dated. We didn't want something that was going to need tweaked over, you know, it was going to look 70s or 80s or 90s, whatever the case is. We wanted something timeless, and Art Deco is certainly that.
Is that, yeah. Yeah, but you've grown fairly substantially over this period of time. You've added the cafe, so you've got a significant number of employees and a significant number of customers. You have some national customers now.
Yeah, we have a lot of national customers and universities, and we're in these different channels. You know, I never really thought about it. We keep things simple, very Iowa simple. So early on, when people were, again, we have this, our industry is young, so it's somewhat immature sometimes. So you can't, there's this, and I think it's kind of goofy, but, well, you can't sell specialty coffee in a grocery store. And we were hearing this in 94, 95, 96, and we'd be like, why? How stupid is that? That's where the people go to buy coffee. Why wouldn't you put it in front of them there if that's where they want to buy it? Who am I to tell you where you should buy your, how jacked up is that? And we'd have these conversations. So I just picture Crosby or one of you folks having your cup of coffee, and if you want to buy it at, you know, Hen House or Cosentino's, or you want to buy it at the cafe, or you want to sit in your office, God forbid somebody in North America has good coffee in their office, why not? You know, why not? What's wrong with that? And just, so that's how it kind of expanded. And then folks were saying, geez, can you get this to us across the country? And we were like, sure. And we're 2 to 3 days from most parts of the country, and we can usually get it there faster than a local roaster in that instance. My friend Lou, who has the Hula Hands group, Jay Gilbert's, they were opening up one in Connecticut, for example. I said, you know, you should find a local roaster, but if you can't, then we'd obviously love it. But, you know, look for a local roaster. We kind of have that philosophy most of the time, although we love the business.
Sure, but your philosophy's been, you talked before about the Italian coffees and Seattle coffees and whatnot, and you obviously get things quicker. I think you said order today, roast today, deliver today is one of your slogans. But as soon as you get national, that changes a little bit. But you can still, as you say, get 2 to 3 days. You can get the
over time. The one thing that has gotten easier, technology has improved. We can get, you know, this speed. I have this kind of this notion of philosophy of velocity. Velocity is your friend. It's if you just think about your iPhone or whatever phone you use, all the different things that you can get done now. Well, shipping and ordering, somebody can order here right now from our website. Hint, hint. No, I'm just teasing. But you could order right now, and we're going to be getting that order. Somebody will roast it. If you get it to us by 12, you can pick it up today. You can get it today. You could have it to your home tomorrow morning. Those types of things have really helped us sustain that velocity and actually make the business easier.
It seems to me that one of the things that's happened in the world, and that the coffee shop and the specialty coffee business what you've done, it represents. There's an interesting kind of tension, sort of a paradox in that velocity is very important. Convenience is hugely important. The fact that I can whiz through the roastery, get my cup of coffee, and get on the road to work is important. But at the same time, it's really based on a kind of lifestyle attitude that you sit down at the table at the roastery and have a conversation with a friend. You'll see somebody you haven't seen for a few weeks come in, and you catch up over your cup of coffee. It seems that you have been able to, what you do and others who are in the business, and what John McDonald does and others, is combine these two things: the convenience that we're an on-the-go world, an on-the-go society, with this moment where you can relax and have a conversation.
Yeah, I like that, Crosby. And when we were putting a cafe together, I wanted speed, and we'd have this yin-yang discussion about speed and speed of delivery. But I said, and I feel very strongly about that, don't make me pay for this. Don't make me wait in line a long time. Now, if I want to chat you up when I get to the counter, great. But don't make me wait in line. So give me my cup of coffee quickly, or my cappuccino, whatever the case is, and then I can go get on my bike, in my car, or go sit and read, or go relax. But hurry up. Speed up that process, and then let me get on my way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
so I can go relax. It sounds kind of goofy, but I don't want us to drag you, the customer, through this long line, or online ordering, or on the phone. So we have this notion of just be easy to do business with, and we really try to have that permeate everything we do.
Right. Giving back in various ways has been important to you, obviously with the fair trade, the sustainability with your suppliers, the folks growing the coffee, but also inside the community. Are there some mentors in this that you've had, some people who've been important to you in your life that have been models for that kind of behavior? And
very much. An easy one early on was Ben & Jerry's. I'd go to a Notre Dame game, and there would be Ben & Jerry's handing out Peace Pops, or go to a National Restaurant Association show, and there was Ben & Jerry's doing their coffee, buzz, buzz, buzz. And it was so fun, but they were handing out samples, and then it was different parts of the community would use their product to kind of further the message. And early on, it was April of '94, and Normie was here, and Mary was working for us, and somebody called to ask us to donate coffee for some cause. And I remember thinking, well, I'd like a bunch of free coffee too. We're trying to sell coffee, we're trying to make a living here, free coffee. And I hung up the phone, and I told the lady I'd get back to her, and Mary said, honey, just say yes. And I vividly remember April of '94, and I went, and I just said yes, and then said yes. And this was not a well thought out strategy by any means. So pretty soon, anybody who's in the not-for-profits know there's like this unwritten list out there, and once you put some product on that list,
you're on the list, and you're definitely on the list.
So now the floodgates open, and we're getting all these calls to donate product, but it was really cool. So the selfishness in that was like, all of a sudden I thought, wow, this is great marketing, and we don't have any money, and I couldn't do marketing otherwise. So yeah, and it's a lot harder, as you know, to get up at 3 or 4 in the morning or whatever the case is and go, schlep all this stuff to wherever you're going than it is to just write a check. Writing a check is so much easier. Though we didn't have any money to write a check, so that's how we kind of slopped into it accidentally.
And people, I think, really appreciate the personal part of this. And it's the same thing you're doing with your suppliers, and it's the same thing you're doing with the quality of the coffee. It's a personal engagement. It's demonstrating your passion in the community.
Well, you're right. I mean, but it's the team, obviously, right? Because after that,
your whole team is, yeah.
Yeah, and that's how. I mean, you have to have people that feel the same way, and so we have a team that's highly engaged. And I think if I offered them up the choice right now, say, hey, you guys, we're going to quit doing this, and I have a bunch of them here, they could vote today. We're going to quit doing this, or we're going to start writing checks. I think they would still, I think we'd still do it.
They like what they're doing.
It's cool, yeah. It's fun. And it works in Kansas City. I doubt whether it would work like this in other cities, but it really speaks to the kind of community that we are.
Yeah, is there something about the Midwestern ethic, not just a work ethic, but a work and community ethic?
I think there is. And I'm not saying this. I out there all the time. I'm so sick of people saying we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't fix our schools, we can't fix the zoo, we can't fix the libraries, we can't fix downtown. Can't. I just, I won't let my kids say can't. My dad would never let me say can't. And now all of a sudden we can do a lot of things. We are doing a lot of things. And I forgot how we got on that rant, sorry.
No.
We're ready. Kansas City. Yeah. So, started with Union Station and then we turned around the zoo. The zoos, I told Rainey I can't wait for people to drive from Omaha to see our zoos. And I used to be in this library here when I was studying at Rockhurst, and a bunch of crabby people in here, and they were very non-customer oriented. Now our libraries are fun to go to.
The secret of that, by the way, is they get Roasterie coffee now in the break room.
But it's an attitude of customer service and an attitude of caring, and we tapped into that as a company, and so we have this groundswell of support. But it's got to go both ways, so you can't just be on the receiving end of that, obviously. But yeah, I think it's unique to Kansas City.
So what's next for the Roasterie?
We're growing at the fastest clip that we ever have right now in our history, and so it's kind of maybe always think of it this way, but it's a little bit counterintuitive in the notion that we have all this choice now. We have a lot of choices. It's kind of like when you're in a restaurant, and if you have a little short menu, it's really easy to make a choice. And if you have this big book of there's inherent stress in choice, right? So we have all these choices of how to grow right now, and it's actually really stressful because you have to choose. It's very important to us that we stay focused on our three tenets: buy the best coffee we can find in the world, roast it the best way known to man, and get it to the customer as fast as humanly possible. So then we layer that or put that on top of where we want to grow, and so where can we be the best? And so that's stressful. So we're making some choices right now. We're actually going through this as we speak. And then the other big, maybe the elephant in the room, if you will, is the single cup strategy.
Right.
The Keurig. All of us know, I mean, if you just take our own Midwestern common sense, once in a while I'll get a question, is that really as good as? I want to say, hell no, it's not as good. What's your common sense tell you? Of course it's not as good.
Right.
But kind of like
But convenience is so important in our world. So all those grocery store foods now, which are designed so that you can hold it, eat it, and get rid of it all in one hand while you're driving your car, or typing on your iPad or whatever it is.
Driving with one knee, talking on the phone. Sorry about that. So I think we can either do the best at that and address that market, or we can kind of be so self-righteous and so alone and be so perfect. And the analogy I use on that is the iPod versus a really incredible Bang & Olufsen stereo. If people knew how bad the iPod sounds compared to a really great stereo, they'd still use the iPod because it's so convenient. And so,
right.
And it's the same thing with the single cup strategy. Most folks, if you put that next to a great cup of coffee or a great espresso, oh my God, there's a huge difference. But still, once I had kids, I totally get it. I get the whole deal,
right.
Especially in the morning. Those 2 minutes in the morning, most folks would trade you an hour in the afternoon for those 2 minutes in the morning.
Right.
That's where it's going to be critical. So I feel pretty strongly that we're going to have to somehow find a way to play in that world.
You have to balance. You still want the feeling that you get from the the conversation over the longer cup of coffee at the cafe, and being able to deliver that experience at the high-end restaurant and in the grocery aisle to the person who is going to take it home and listen to their Bang & Olufsen, but also give that quick cup to the person who's listening to their iPod on their way to work.
Right, and we don't have, for example, same notion. We don't have any drive-throughs, not accidentally. We don't want drive-throughs. But we do live in we're conscious of the world that we live in, and I'd rather do a lot of things than lecture you on how you should, brew our coffee and use the coffee and stuff like that. And
right.
So it's a tough one, but it's the real world.
Right. Well, it sounds like you still have your passion. I do have to ask you one last question, just coming from my own personal point of view. Is it difficult to be really successful, really tall, and really good looking?
My dad would say you're 1 out of 3, maybe, I'm tall, but that's about it.
Well, Danny, I do want to thank you for being here. You are the guy who wakes up Kansas City, and you've awakened us today. Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Danny O'Neill.